Hello, everybody. How are you today? This beautiful day that the Lord has made. I'm Carin Jane Casey on the podcast Turn to God with Carin, and today we have a special episode about domestic violence. And I have with me a special guest, William Lightfoot, and he's a consultant who can talk to us about domestic violence. So he's with Lightfoot Consulting Associates, and he consults specifically about elder abuse and domestic violence in the workplace. And we're going to talk about that later on. So I have a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
But before we get started, I think we're going to have to find out what the definition of domestic violence is.
Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior with the specific intent of maintaining power and control over a victim. That type of behavior could include assault. It could include threatening, coercion, intimidation, anything that will cause a victim to be controlled.
Wow. Okay. Is domestic violence, the main thing is power and control, right?
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Power and control is a method of controlling a person's actions, their thoughts, or their willingness to accept the abuser without question, or to accept their actions without question.
Well, what are some of the types of doing this?
It includes humiliation, it includes emotional abuse, physical assault, sexual assault, financial exploitation, and you hear that a lot in elder abuse. But a domestic violence victim is also subjected to financial abuse. There are a lot of victims who aren't even allowed to go and get a job because that means they won't have money. Or if they are allowed to get a job and have money, most of that money is turned over to the abuser. So they are being financially exploited. Social isolation. I'm not going to let you talk to anyone. I'm not going to let you visit anyone, including your parents, because you may say something that will indicate that you're being abused.
Right,
so they're
to expose
isolated.
it, yeah.
So they're isolated.
Also, that keeps them from getting information on how to get out.
It does. I've had victims who were so controlled that the abuser would not let them read a magazine because it means that to the abuser, that's a connection with what's going on. They couldn't read a magazine, they couldn't read a newspaper.
Yeah, it might have the abuse hotline number on it or something.
It could, it is the power and control dynamic. I am going to control your every action. And what I've found is that when that is put into jeopardy, that's when the victim is really they're in danger a lot more when that control dynamic, when the abuser thinks they've lost control, that's when she's really in danger.
Right, because they've got to pull back in.
Right.
No matter what. So when you said domestic violence in the workplace, I wasn't sure what you meant at first. So maybe people in the audience aren't sure what you're talking about there either.
When a person is abused and they do have a job, that that violence follows them from home to work. It doesn't stop because they walk out the door and go into their place of employment. Victims are harassed. The abuser shows up at their workplace, and it can escalate to the point where they are being assaulted at the workplace. So it doesn't stop at home. It will follow a victim to work, which can create several things. Number one, they are still in danger, even though they're working.
Mm-hmm.
Other employees are in danger. Because if it escalates to the point of physical violence, then the employers or employees surrounding that victim are also in danger.
So then the boss is likely to fire them just to be free of all that aggravation. Is there any hope that there will be help there?
I've actually had a victim who was fired because you're blaming the victim for the actions of the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
And this employer did fire the victim, and the recourse was that we went to EEOC.
So that's a good thing for people to know. There is recourse.
Yes, EEOC and OSHA both have specific documents or specific rules, and they have put out information guidelines to employers that that's unacceptable. You cannot fire the victim because of the actions. The employer really has a responsibility for the victim's safety and well-being, and to do whatever is necessary to keep the victim safe while they're at work. And every employer should have a written policy, and usually it comes through their HR departments. HR departments need to be fully understanding of what they can do to assist domestic violence victims. And one of the things businesses should do is to build partnerships with domestic violence programs where they can refer this victim to get help. But all of that needs to be in a written policy, and both employers, the employees, and the management should understand that that policy exists in the company.
Okay. So similar to sexual harassment, they make a point of having little workshops and explain it to the employees. They need to have something in place to explain their rules and about domestic violence in the workplace too.
They should. And it should be well understood that not only is the policy, it's not just there for decoration, we're actually going to do this. And if the abuser comes onto this property with the intent of causing harm to either the victim or anyone else, that they will be prosecuted for their actions.
That would be a great deterrent. So a lot of people ask, why did she stay? I mean, when a woman is, or usually a woman, is in a domestic violence situation, people on the outside look and say, why did she stay? And I know there's a lot of reasons. Could you go over some of them?
You know, I have heard that question hundreds of times, and it usually comes as well, why didn't she just leave?
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
And to a lot of people that makes sense. Why didn't she just pack up her stuff and leave? It takes a victim on an average of 7 to 10 times to actually run.
To successfully
To,
get
to,
away.
to get, not just that, but to make up their mind that I have had enough and I'm out of here.
Mm.
But they have been abused. That's not something that the abuse happens today and they pack up tomorrow. It can go on for years. I've had victims who were domestic violence victims for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been a victim their entire life. But why didn't she just leave? Because, number one, she's in more danger. Because that power and control dynamic that we talked about is not there anymore.
So they're
So
going to
that-
make every effort to get that back. And,
She is in real danger. The fear and nowhere to go. A lot of victims have no family, no friends. So where's she going to run to? There's nowhere to run.
right.
There's nowhere to run with the kids. Suppose she has 3 kids. She can't just pick up and leave. And I actually had a victim that actually left the children in the house. But when she ran, she ran straight to the police station.
Oh, that's good. And you know, there are shelters available, but women don't know that, or the victim doesn't know that unless they do research.
Right.
And they call the domestic violence hotline number, and then they find out what shelters are in their vicinity. It kind of takes a little bit of planning.
It does. It takes a lot of planning. And, you know, she may not have transportation. If she doesn't have a car, he doesn't allow her to drive. How's she going to run? There's no way for her to run. She doesn't have any friends because he hasn't allowed any friends. So she has no transportation, no support mechanism. If she runs, where's she going to run to? And is there anyone that can support her actions? And many domestic violence victims have no support mechanism. The mistaken belief, and you know, I've had victims tell me, well, you know, it happened once, but it'll get better.
Yeah, he'll change.
Yeah, he'll change, or it will stop. It's a mistaken belief that the abuse will just end, which is far from being true. The abuse doesn't just stop, it gets worse, and it escalates over time. Loss of the kids. If I run, I've had victims ask me, if I run, am I going to lose my children? So they stay because they have this fear that their children are going to be taken away from them. That has been implanted by him.
Right.
If you leave, you're going to leave and you're never going to see your kids again. That's a great motivator to stay. And believe it or not, and one of the great motivators to stay is love. They love their abuser, and they will not leave.
Yeah, I know I was in domestic violence a long time ago, and it was life-threatening, but I had hope. Clear up until the end, I still had hope, and I think so many victims hold on to that hope that something will happen, that it will not, there won't be abuse anymore, but the person will change. And, you know, ideally, they're going to get in contact with a shelter before they have to take off and get an escape plan. And you know.
But they have to know the shelter's there.
Right, they have to be aware of it.
They have to know that it exists. I was a police officer for 36 years. And my last assignment was in a domestic violence unit. And I can't tell you how many victims we talked to in that unit um, that that say, I just can't leave him because I love him.
Wow.
It's a great motivator to stay and take the abuse. Or I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere for my kids to go. Where are we going to live? That self-preservation kicks in, and they really don't understand that there are some options out there.
So that love is probably an emotional attachment that came on over time because they're so dependent on this abusive person.
That's true, but you know, it is also that hope, like you just said,
Yeah,
that this is going to stop, this is going to end,
it's going to change.
and he's going to stop being abusive. That's not true. It's only going to get worse. And if you don't get help, you're going to be a victim. Like I say, I've had victims who were victims for over 40 years and never knew anything was out of step. It was normal.
Yeah, that was their normal life.
Yeah, that's the way it was supposed to be.
And that may come from child abuse, watching parents in their domestic violence, and
I do some work with immigrant women who are victims of domestic violence, and one of the things we really have to look at when we get a victim is culture. What culture are they coming from? Because in some cultures, in 60-some countries, there is no law against domestic violence.
No.
And I've posted that several times on media, on social media, to get people to understand that the country where they come from, the authorities in that country may not be the help that they need. They may very well be the problem itself, because there are no laws to cover a woman being. But when they come here, that has created a mistrust in the authorities. I'm not going to the police because, number one, I'm a foreign national. Number two, they're not going to do anything anyway.
Yeah, they make those assumptions.
Yeah. So culture plays a great role.
So how prevalent is domestic violence overall? How prevalent is it?
I did not include the numbers, but
Well, they're ever changing anyway. But
the National Intimate Partner, a lot of summaries come out, and the numbers are dramatic, a lot more than we tend to want to believe.
are they decreasing or increasing?
They have increased, and one of the reasons was the pandemic. Instead of a victim having the option of going to work, a lot of employers have employees working at home.
So there they are with their abuser.
The other thing that we talked about earlier is that we need to take a look at what we consider domestic violence. And I have stopped using the word intimate partner violence so much.
Because it affects everybody.
It affects it, and even the children. Children see, hear, and react to family violence or to domestic violence. And if some of these kids who are affected because they see the violence, that emotional damage lasts an entire lifetime.
So then the children, thinking that's normal because they've been seeing it all their life, they're going to go on and either become an abuser or be abused.
That's a great possibility.
And there's a legacy of abuse then.
You know, there's a great possibility. Kids are sometimes also used as triggers.
As triggers.
Yeah. In other words, I'm not going to assault you. I'm not going to hurt you if you don't do what I tell you. I'm going to beat the 5-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Or the 6-year-old. And the victims will comply because they don't want the kids hurt. So the child is being used as a trigger.
Yeah. And that would keep the person from leaving too.
It would, or reporting.
All from the children. So, what are financial institutions doing about this? I mean, is there any help there?
It can be. Remember, a victim who is financially abused has no money. One of the things banks can do, and you can do it in both domestic violence and elder abuse, is number one, become aware of what domestic violence is. 2 is to team or partner with a domestic violence service and help that victim build a bank account.
Oh, that would be wonderful. So not necessarily protect what they do have, because they may not have anything to start with, but help them to build.
You have to kind of remember that a domestic violence victim may know nothing about banking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have a 23, 24-year-old, and she's never had an account. She's never had money because he has it. So she doesn't understand how to build that bank account. But the bank needs to partner with, or the financial institution needs to partner with a domestic violence program.
Mm-hmm.
So that the program can say, look, we can take you to the bank and we'll get you set up with an account.
That would be excellent.
You know, so financial institutions really can be that way for her out to build, to have her own money.
All right, well, it looks like that's all we have time for today, but I encourage everyone to contact Bill Lightfoot with more questions you might have. Maybe he can do a consulting service. And as I said at the beginning, he has Lightfoot Consulting Associates, that's in Richmond, Virginia. He consults about elder abuse and domestic violence. And I'll give you his email, lightfootwh976@gmail.com. He has a phone number he's willing to give out, and that's 804-986-4631. Now, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having
about
me.
this very important topic, and I hope it's whet people's interest and they will want to find out more, particularly what they can do for themselves or for other people that they know are in domestic violence. I want to give the hotline number. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-799-7233. So thank you.
Thank you.
And God bless.